Hello, this is Father Rich coming to you from the main church. Haven't done, I don't think, many of the How the Church Changed the World series essays that we've done in the church. But I'm here in front of this the beautiful olive wood carving from the Holy Land from Bethlehem that the pilgrims from Israel, from OLP, got for the parish last October, a year ago. Hard to believe. And we want to thank again Frank and Kathy Eberly, who just finished this the stand for it, this cabinet for its display. We're still working on the glass overhang here. But so I placed within that this other carving. You might remember when in the office, when I gave you a quick tour of where I usually sit with people, that this was on the table there. Jesus washing the feet of the disciples at the Last Supper. So Jesus is here in the olive wood carving. There's a whole explanation. You can go online or check out the spiritual resources on our website, but also to get more information about this, the setup of the Oriental way to eat and who is sitting where. But Jesus is here. And the one who was the servant that sat over here, this is usually the servant spot. This is where Peter sat. So remember, Jesus was constantly saying that if you want to be the greatest among everyone, you have to be the servant of all. And in fact, in Mark 10:44, in the gospel, remember, he says you have to be the slave of all. So this idea that to be the first, we must be the last. We must humble ourselves, and then we are exalted. And this next essay really talks about someone who took that literally. The name of the essay is The Slave of the Ethiopian Slaves, and it's about St. Peter Claver, whose feast day is September 9th. He was born in Spain and was teaching in the Mediterranean Sea at Palma at a Jesuit school, college. Had everything you could want, beautiful, area, Mediterranean climate, and but he became friends with a Jesuit doorman, doorkeeper, who ended up being canonized as Saint Alonso. I forget his last name. Saint Alonso Rodriguez, and he was very humble, very good man. We think of other doorkeepers in North America that became saints. Saint Andre Bessette up in Montreal, the miracle worker of Montreal. Blessed Solanus Casey in Detroit. Very kind of similar story. But he was friends with this St. Peter Claver. In their discussions, he felt the call to go to the Caribbean. And he went there, became a Jesuit, was ordained a few years later. I think he got there in 1610. And 1615, he was ordained a priest. And he took over the ministry of another kind of saintly man. I don't think he's canonized, but his name was Father Alfonso. Forget Alfonso's last name, but he had a great ministry of 40 years to help working with the slaves. This was kind of a thriving port that was the center of the African slave trade, unfortunately. And so he would work in the example. So St. Alphonsus, I don't remember his last name. But he would continue that ministry. And they say the first thing they would get off the boats, and a third of the slaves would die, the Africans. They just putrid, disgusting conditions. They would come off with disease and, just all kinds of just really challenging sicknesses and conditions. And he would love them. They go so far to say that he would actually suck the pus and the other stuff out of the wounds of the sick. He treated them with love and respect. He would go with interpreters to try to help them understand he was doing this in the name of Christ. And unfortunately, the slave traders were very often also Catholic, and a horrible example of it. But yet here he was a holy example of the Catholic faith and what we're called to as Catholics. And so, believe it or not, over his 40 years of ministry, over 300,000 of these slave traders, they say, tens of thousands would come through a year. 300,000 were baptized by St. Peter Claver. He also not only just ministered to the slaves, but he had a very powerful ministry of preaching and missions, and very well respected in that regard. And even though the civil authorities didn't necessarily support him or like what he did in the sense of the challenges he would present to them, they still gave him a full civil burial with all the honors because of the significance of who he was. He died in the 1650s. So we see this holy relationship between St. Alonso and St. Peter Claver. They both called to different ministries, but yet did it with their whole heart and being, and really changed the world for the people that they met, those people that came to the door of the Jesuit community there in Palma and in Spain, or those who witnessed this sacrificial, heroic love and ministry to the poorest of the poor. Really think of Mother Teresa when you think of St. Peter Claver of the 1600s. And so he's sometimes called the slave of the slaves. And this idea that we're all called to be slaves. Now, interestingly enough, we know Jesus at other times in John's gospel says, I don't call you slaves, I call you friends. So even though we're called to put ourselves in the place of where the slave is, our God exalts us to be on that same level with him as friend and lover. And so we remember that's the amazing love of our God. But it all starts when we will ourselves to be the lowest, to be the slave. And then we're exalted to friendship, to eternity by the incredible gift of our God. So let's allow St. Peter Claver to inspire us. Again, reinforced by Jesus washing the feet at the Last Supper, putting Peter, the leader of his church, at the servant spot. We can't avoid this call to humble ourselves, to be the last, so that God can exalt us in his grace to be the first. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and God bless.